In 711, the Visigothic kingdom stood on the brink, not of glory, but of collapse. A year earlier, King Roderick, Duke of Betica, had seized the throne in Toledo, overthrowing the young ruler Witiza. But his victory was hollow. In the northeast, Attila, likely Witiza's son, claimed kingship, splitting the realm. Noble against noble, brother against brother, the Visigoths were tearing themselves apart, and from across the sea, an empire watched. The Umayyad Caliphate, having swept across North Africa, saw Hispania not as a kingdom, but as prey. Musa ibn Nusayr, governor of Ifriqiya, had already tested its defenses. What he found was chaos, no unity, no strong leadership, only a fractured land ripe for conquest. He appointed Tariq ibn Ziyad, a bold Berber general, to lead the invasion. In early 711, Tariq crossed the Strait of Gibraltar with 7,000 warriors, landing on the southern coast. Towns fell with little resistance. Impressed, Musa sent 5,000 reinforcements, bringing Tariq's force to 12,000, small in number, but hardened, loyal, and driven by faith. At that moment, Roderick was in the north, suppressing a Basque revolt. When news of the invasion reached him, he abandoned the campaign and rushed south, rallying an army of 35,000 men. Even former enemies, supporters of Witiza, joined his cause. They knew this was no ordinary war. If the Muslims were not stopped, there would be no kingdom left to rule. Determined to end the threat, Roderick marched toward destiny. As he advanced, Tariq took position on high ground near the Guadalete river, ready for the clash that would decide the fate of Iberia. Tariq ibn Ziyad, commanding a smaller but disciplined force, had fortified his position with earthworks and adopted a defensive stance. His plan was clear: absorb the initial charge of the larger Visigothic army, then unleash his swift Berber cavalry to exploit fatigue and confusion. But even before the first spear was thrown, Tariq had ensured his men would not falter. According to legend, upon landing in Hispania, some of his soldiers hesitated, daunted by the size of the enemy and the sea behind them. To eliminate any thought of retreat, Tariq gave a fateful order: burn the ships. As flames consumed the fleet, he stood before his men and spoke words that would echo through history.
"O people, where is the escape? The sea is behind you and the enemy before you. And by Allah, you have nothing left but conviction and perseverance."
There was no escape, only victory or death. Opposing him was King Roderick, mounted at the head of an army 3 times larger. He placed his elite heavy cavalry at the forefront, flanked by noble retainers, while his infantry formed the second line. His strategy was straightforward: use the sheer weight of his armored knights to break the Muslim center, then flood forward with infantry to crush what remained. Yet numbers could not compensate for cohesion. While Roderick's cavalry was formidable, much of his army consisted of poorly trained conscripts and levies, many forced into service. Loyalty was thin, morale uncertain. As the battle began, Roderick ordered a full frontal assault. His charging cavalry met a storm of javelins and arrows from Tariq's skirmishers, slowing their advance. Still, the Visigoths pressed forward, crashing into the Berber lines in brutal hand-to-hand combat. Tariq's defensive tactics initially held firm, blunting the Visigothic advance. But as Roderick's forces began to tire, Tariq seized the moment. He ordered his light cavalry to strike at the Visigothic flanks in a bold counterattack. Though initially repelled, this feigned retreat lured more of Roderick's troops into the chaotic melee at the center. With the Visigothic flanks now dangerously exposed, Tariq launched a decisive maneuver. His cavalry, previously held in reserve, surged forward in a flanking assault, encircling Roderick's forces. At this critical moment, betrayal struck the Visigothic ranks. Oppa and Cisberto, likely commanding the flanks, abandoned the battle, leaving their positions wide open. Sensing victory, Tariq ordered a general assault. The combined force of the Muslim push shattered the last vestiges of Visigothic resistance. As panic set in, Roderick's foot soldiers broke ranks, fleeing in all directions. His cavalry, though disciplined, was gradually overwhelmed and cut down. Realizing his kingdom was crumbling before his eyes, Roderick, once the mighty king of the Visigoths, faced the bitter truth. His rule had ended not in triumph, but in utter defeat. The fate of King Roderick himself remains uncertain. Some accounts claim he perished in combat, perhaps even clashing personally with Tariq. Others suggest he drowned while attempting to escape across the river. Regardless, the battle ended in total disaster for the Visigoths. Over 16,000 of their troops were killed or wounded, while Tariq's forces suffered only 3,000 casualties. The victory at Guadalete was more than a triumph. It was a turning point in history. The Muslim conquest of Hispania had begun. The Battle of Guadalete shattered the Visigothic kingdom, leaving it in chaos. With much of the ruling class eliminated and internal divisions deepening, the realm was virtually defenseless. Seizing their momentum, the Umayyad forces swiftly advanced, capturing key cities and besieging Toledo, the Visigothic capital, within months. This victory marked the beginning of Muslim rule in the Iberian Peninsula and the rise of Al-Andalus. Over the centuries, this new Islamic state fostered a rich cultural and intellectual era known as the Islamic Golden Age, influencing science, art, and philosophy. The region became a melting pot where Islam, Christianity, and Judaism coexisted, shaping the identity of Spain for generations. From the ashes of the Visigothic kingdom, a new era had begun, one that would shape the destiny of Iberia for centuries to come. In the early 8th century, the Muslim Umayyad Caliphate was at the height of its power, rapidly expanding across North Africa and into the Iberian Peninsula. In 711, they achieved a major victory at the Battle of Guadalete, where an Umayyad force led by Tariq ibn Ziyad defeated the Visigothic king Roderick. This decisive battle shattered the Visigothic kingdom, opening the doors for the swift and near-total conquest of Iberia by the Umayyads. Over the next few years, the Muslim forces continued to push north, consolidating their control over the region and establishing Al-Andalus. However, the ambitions of the Umayyad governors in Al-Andalus did not stop at the Pyrenees. In 718, Al-Sam ibn Malik al-Khawlani was appointed governor, and under his leadership, the Umayyads sought to expand their influence into Gaul. Their first target was the Duchy of Aquitaine, a semi-independent realm ruled by Duke Odo the Great. Odo, having witnessed the fall of the Visigoths and the rapid expansion of Muslim forces across Iberia, was acutely aware of the threat posed by the Umayyads. In 719, Al-Sam led a successful campaign that captured Narbonne, establishing a foothold in southern Gaul. Over the next 2 years, the Muslim forces continued to raid deeper into Aquitaine, spreading fear and panic throughout the region. In early 721, Al-Sam set his sights on the Aquitanian stronghold of Toulouse, hoping to deliver a crippling blow to Odo's power. In early 721, the siege of Toulouse began. Al-Sam ibn Malik al-Khawlani's forces, fresh off a string of swift victories, believed this would be yet another conquest for the Umayyad Caliphate. With a cavalry-heavy army and the advantage of mobility, Al-Sam had been unstoppable in southern Gaul. But as the weeks dragged on, the 3 months of waiting outside the walls of Toulouse stripped away their advantage. The Muslim forces had become stagnant, relying heavily on the prospect of the city's eventual surrender rather than engaging in active warfare. Odo, Duke of Aquitaine, took full advantage of this lull. Throughout those months, he quietly marshaled his army, assembling a force of between 8,000 and 12,000 soldiers. Al-Sam, perhaps overconfident, did little to scout the area, assuming no significant resistance would come. This overconfidence led to his downfall. By early June, Odo had successfully maneuvered his forces south of Toulouse, cutting off the Muslim army's access to their supply lines and any potential reinforcements from Narbonne. Al-Sam, unaware of the full scale of the danger looming behind him, was about to face one of the most decisive moments of his career. On June 9th, as dawn broke, the first signs of trouble emerged. Odo's forces, positioned south of the Umayyad camp, prepared for an all-out assault. Odo, aware that a direct attack from the front would be disastrous against the formidable Muslim cavalry, struck from the rear. With the element of surprise on his side, Odo's forces descended upon the unsuspecting Umayyad camp. The sound of hooves thundering in the distance quickly reached the ears of the Muslim sentries, but it was too late. Odo's army smashed into the rear of Al-Sam's troops, catching them completely off guard. Confusion erupted in the camp as Muslim soldiers scrambled to form a coherent defense. At the same time, the garrison from inside Toulouse took advantage of the chaos and launched a daring sally, attacking from the front. Al-Sam's army, now surrounded on two sides, tried to rally under their general's leadership. For several hours, the battle was an intense melee, with both sides locked in brutal combat. The Umayyads, though taken by surprise, did not break easily. Al-Sam, despite being severely wounded early in the battle, urged his men to hold the line. Muslim soldiers, both Arab and Berber, fought with determination, but the combined forces of Odo's army and the city's defenders began to overwhelm them. As the battle dragged on, Al-Sam's injury worsened. Without his leadership, the coordination among the Umayyad forces began to collapse. Some units tried to flee, but with Odo's forces blocking their retreat to the south and the Toulouse garrison pressing them from the north, escape was nearly impossible. With their lines breaking and thousands of Muslim soldiers falling on the battlefield, the once feared army of Al-Sam crumbled. A small contingent of survivors, realizing that all hope was lost, managed to break through the encirclement and retreat toward Narbonne, carrying their mortally wounded commander with them. By the time the dust settled, the battlefield outside Toulouse was strewn with the bodies of thousands of Muslim soldiers. Odo's forces had achieved a decisive and overwhelming victory. Al-Sam, though he escaped with his life initially, succumbed to his wounds soon after reaching Narbonne. This crushing defeat not only ended the immediate threat to Toulouse, but also marked the first major setback for the Umayyad expansion into Europe. Odo's victory would echo through the halls of history as one of the most significant battles of the early Middle Ages. The Battle of Toulouse marked the first major disaster for the Umayyad expansion into Europe. The devastating defeat shattered their momentum, halted raids into Gaul for years, and brought a temporary end to the Caliphate's ambitions to push into the heart of Christendom. For Duke Odo, the victory was monumental. His defense of Toulouse earned him widespread acclaim, solidified his rule over Aquitaine, and even won recognition from the Pope, who sent gifts to honor his triumph. Yet his struggle was far from over. In the years that followed, Odo faced repeated invasions as the Umayyads sought to reclaim their foothold in Gaul. The retreat to Narbonne was led by Abd al-Rahman, who would return in 732 to launch another invasion, culminating in the fateful Battle of Tours, where he would face both Odo and Charles Martel. By the early 8th century, the expansion of the Umayyad Caliphate seemed unstoppable. Originating in the Arabian Peninsula, the Muslim forces rapidly conquered vast territories, reaching the Iberian Peninsula by 711 after their decisive victory over the Visigothic king Roderick at the Battle of Guadalete. Within a few years, the Islamic forces overran Hispania, pushing northward into Septimania by 719, a region that served as a crucial foothold for further invasions into the heart of Christian Europe. Duke Odo of Aquitaine, a semi-independent ruler in the Frankish realm, faced this rising threat head-on. In 721, he achieved a remarkable victory at the Battle of Toulouse, where his forces decisively defeated the Umayyad governor Al-Sam ibn Malik, temporarily halting the Muslim advance. This success, however, did not bring lasting peace. Odo's request for aid from Charles Martel, the Frankish mayor of the palace, was rejected, leaving Aquitaine to face the southern threat alone. Despite the setback at Toulouse, the Umayyad resolve remained firm. Abd al-Rahman al-Ghafiqi, a charismatic and experienced leader, rose to command the Muslim forces. By 732, tensions within Al-Andalus had deepened, particularly between the ruling Arab elite and the Berber contingents. These internal conflicts provided an opportunity for Odo, who allied with the Berber rebel Munusa, sealing the pact with the marriage of his daughter. This alliance, however, provoked Abd al-Rahman, who crushed Munusa's rebellion and turned his attention toward Aquitaine. Abd al-Rahman's army, estimated at 15,000 to 20,000 men, crossed the Pyrenees and swept through Odo's territories, devastating the lands as they advanced. Odo's attempt to stop the Muslim forces near Bordeaux ended in disaster, with his army nearly annihilated. Facing the destruction of his domain, Odo fled north to seek help from Charles Martel. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, Charles began assembling his forces, leading to the pivotal confrontation at the Battle of Tours. In October of 732, near the city of Toulouse, the forces of the Umayyad Caliphate, led by Abd al-Rahman al-Ghafiqi, clashed with the Frankish army commanded by Charles Martel. The Umayyad forces were predominantly cavalry, including both Arab and Berber horsemen armed with swords, spears, and bows. Their strength lay in their mobility and shock tactics, but they were encumbered by the loot they had gathered during their campaign, which hampered their maneuverability. Charles Martel's Frankish army, in contrast, was primarily composed of veteran infantry, renowned for their discipline and defensive capabilities. These soldiers fought in tight formations, using shields, spears, and axes to form a formidable defensive wall. Though the Franks had only a limited cavalry force, their strategic use of the terrain and their well-coordinated infantry formations were key to their defense. The battle commenced with Abd al-Rahman deploying his cavalry in an aggressive attempt to smash through the Frankish lines. However, the Frankish infantry, well prepared for such engagements, formed a solid shield wall with their spears pointed outward. Despite the strength and aggression of the Muslim cavalry, the Frankish defenses held firm. Undeterred, al-Rahman ordered his infantry to advance in waves, hoping to exploit any weaknesses in the Frankish lines. The repeated Muslim charges, though fierce, failed to break through the steadfast Frankish formation. The Umayyad forces, having sustained significant casualties, pulled back to reorganize and prepare for a renewed assault. As the Umayyad infantry advanced once more, Frankish reinforcements emerged from the surrounding forest, effectively covering any breaches in their line and bolstering their defenses. In the heat of the battle, Duke Odo of the Franks led a strategic flanking maneuver with his cavalry around the Umayyad lines. Odo's forces attacked the Muslim camp, aiming to loot and destroy vital supplies. This attack on the camp caused significant disruption among the Umayyad forces. Realizing their camp was under siege, many Muslim soldiers panicked and withdrew from the battlefield to defend their base. Charles Martel seized this opportunity to launch a decisive counterattack, pushing into the disorganized Umayyad camp and engaging the retreating forces. The battle reached its climax with the death of Abd al-Rahman. Though this did not immediately lead to a complete rout, it significantly demoralized the Umayyad troops. As evening fell, Charles Martel ordered a withdrawal to his own camp, despite his forces being battered. By the following morning, the Umayyad army had managed a disciplined withdrawal during the night, leaving behind their camp, prisoners, and a large cache of loot. The Frankish forces, having maintained their cohesion and suffered fewer casualties, did not pursue the retreating enemy, partially due to the difficulties of engaging a retreating and well-equipped force. The Battle of Tours was a pivotal confrontation that halted the northward expansion of the Umayyad Caliphate into Western Europe, securing the region under Frankish control. The Battle of Tours marked a decisive turning point in European history. The Frankish forces, under Charles Martel, emerged victorious, halting the Umayyad advance into Western Europe and securing Christendom from further incursions. Despite being outnumbered and exhausted, the Franks held their ground. Martel's strategic brilliance and the disciplined stand of his infantry shattered the momentum of the Muslim army. His use of a dense defensive formation repelled repeated cavalry charges, proving that heavy infantry could defeat the fast-moving Umayyad forces. For the Umayyads, the defeat was devastating. Their commander, Abd al-Rahman al-Ghafiqi, was killed in the fighting, and up to 12,000 men were lost, far exceeding Frankish casualties of around 1,000. As the Muslim army retreated, they abandoned much of their plunder, crippling their logistical strength. Though they withdrew in order, their campaign into Gaul was over. The victory preserved the Christian heartland of Europe and prevented a potential Muslim foothold deep in the west. Had the Franks fallen, the cultural and political landscape of Europe might have been forever altered. Charles Martel's triumph not only saved his realm, it laid the foundation for the rise of the Carolingian Empire. The Battle of Tours stands as a testament to Martel's leadership and the resilience of his warriors, a single clash that shaped the future of Western Europe.